Didik TV KPM.
Hello, Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. How is everybody watching us right now? You're watching Didik TV KPM for our Sukses SPM 2022 slot for today with me, Syafiqah Farahin. And today is very special. We are going to be revising together for Kesusasteraan Inggeris for our 2206 paper. So for all the candidates who are going to be sitting for this paper, be prepared. You will learn all the techniques and formats needed to excel and pass in this paper. So before we get ahead into the details, let's first take a look at who the teacher is for today. And there you have it, our teacher for today, who is none other than teacher Asimah. Hi teacher, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, and you?
I'm doing great, teacher. Before we get started, teacher, I would first like to introduce as well our sign language interpreter for today, who is teacher Saiful Amri Sailan from SM Pendidikan Khas Vocational Shah Alam Selangor. Hello teacher Saiful Amri, how are you? All right, it's great to have you here with us today. Now, teacher Asimah, our subject that we'll be revising together is Kesusasteraan Inggeris, and we're learning for 2206. So, for this paper, what is the details of this? What will we be learning today for the techniques and the formulas that we need to excel so we pass the paper?
All right. Shall we start?
Yes, let's start.
Okay. So, hello everybody out there preparing for your paper. To answer Syafiqah's question, what we hope to achieve today will be, we're going to take a look at a general overview of the paper. So then maybe I could persuade Syafiqah to also fall in love with this subject, what the format is like and what kind of time management aspects are important. And then we plan to break the rest of the lesson into the different sections of the paper. Okay?
All right.
So, as mentioned earlier, the paper is called Kesusasteraan Inggeris, and it will be, for those taking this paper, the final paper for SPM 2022.
It's the final one.
It's the finale. It's quite sad to think about it that way, but they still have time to prepare. So let's hope that today's review lesson will help them.
All right.
To begin with, let's take a quick look at what the format of the paper is. So pupils should know this already so well, I'm sure. They have already prepared themselves to answer section A, B and C. So the paper itself is a paper that is made up of 3 sections. You have your section A, prose, you have your section B, drama, and then you have your section C, poetry. Pupils already know whether they're going to answer based on the short stories or the novel, which drama they have selected and studied. Also, they would have done a thorough reading and analysis of all 10 poems. That's before the battle begins, right? Now, as we prepare to go into war, perhaps the first thing I would like to remind everyone out there is how much time to allocate. So we know for sure that each of these 3 sections are made up of 2 questions. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, section A has 2 questions, an A and a B. Likewise with drama, also an A and a B. And then poetry, a pair of questions, A and B. So generally 6 questions. But if you're looking at the division of marks to achieve, it's actually 35, 35 and 30. Obviously, we hope that candidates will have more time in preparing for the first 2 sections. I would like to also say that this is merely a guideline. I find that this is a guideline that works well with most candidates. So I'm hoping this is something that will help everyone out there. We know that the 2 questions, or the first 4 questions overall, will eat up your 70 marks. So please take your time, perhaps 50 to 55 minutes for section A. That's under an hour, as you can see, followed by drama, again 50 to 55 minutes. So that's already about 105 to 110 minutes. And we know for a fact the entire paper from start to end is 2.5 hours. So that actually leaves candidates with only 40 minutes approximately to tackle the last 2 questions. Again, like I mentioned, it is merely a guideline. There could be candidates out there who feel that they would like to attempt or answer the poetry section first. There are no hard and fast rules about which section you might want to answer first. However, generally speaking, you should manage your time well as you maneuver through the 2 hours and 30 minutes. As it shows there, 15 and 20, followed by 15 and 20, followed by 15 and 15. And there you have it. That's your 100 points right there. All right. Now, what is most important for pupils out there to remember, apart from the format, apart from time management? This would be none other than the assessment objectives. Those of you who are preparing for this paper, you know very well that this is a requirement, absolutely crucial for you to do well. And I'm sure this is a quick review for those who already know this very well, but I'm still going to go through this 4 elements. The assessment objectives are made up of your AO1, AO2, AO3, and AO4. All the 6 essays that pupils write need to have these 4. Meaning, if you had a recipe, the ingredients must all be there. The recipe is incomplete without any one of these 4 ingredients. Most candidates are very comfortable with AO1. They can tell the story, they can provide textual evidence. But knowing the text well is only AO1. And what we hope the candidates can do is to also prove that they can understand and show that they can discern underlying meaning. So it's not so much what happened. I hope I didn't lose you there. It's not just what happened, but also what actually happened. There's always an underlying meaning to plot, to character interaction. So that's AO1 and 2. Also, don't forget the AO3, which is the use of language. Especially in poetry, use of language is absolutely crucial. And then what I feel there are many pupils out there struggling with is AO4. How do I respond to the task? How do I respond to the text? Normally, if I'm in class and I ask them, how do you feel? What do you think? They might even look at me with a blank expression and say, I don't know. And that's a no-no.
Right.
That's a no-no. You need to respond to the text as well as to the task. So, for quick review, I thought I'd show this today. For everybody out there, please remember when you are thinking of how I feel. What did I think about that person? What did I think about that event? Think about it in either a positive manner or a negative manner. That will help you to identify your emotions towards the text, towards the task. So as you can see on the slide, you could feel pleased, you could feel sympathy, you could feel sorry for the character. On the other hand, if it was a negative event, if it was something you disagreed with, show very clearly in your response. It was a shock to me. I would have been embarrassed. I would have been embarrassed if it had happened to me. So that shows very clearly you are providing a mature and critical response. I find that some pupils, as they go through the short stories and novels, for example, they can only say, yeah, that was right. Or no, that was wrong. But they are unable to go beyond that. So I'm hoping that with this set of emotions, please think about how you are going to respond and express your AO4 clearly.
All right, Teacher Asimah. Now, that was a bit about the assessment format, which comprised of section A, B, and C, and also not to forget to quote back what teacher said, manage your time well to maneuver around the questions. Now, we're going for a short break now, and we'll be right back here on Sukses SPM 2022 Pecutan.
Didik TV KPM.
Hello SPM candidates, let's revise together today on Sukses SPM 2022 Pecutan. You're with me, Syafiqah, and also teacher Asimah for today, and we are studying for Kesusasteraan Inggeris, and for this segment we are going to be focusing on section A for prose. Now teacher, what is the important thing about this section?
All right, thank you for the question. And ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. When we are looking at section A, prose, perhaps the first decision you made when you began this journey was to decide whether you were going to read through and analyze 6 short stories or one of the 2 novels. By now, candidates would be very familiar with the 6 short stories, the novel The Lost King, or the novel The Clay Marble. And as we saw earlier, we know for a fact that from this section there will be 2 kinds of question, an A question and a B question. So let's get down to the details, all right? An A question is going to be based on a given extract or passage, meaning it comes from the text. A given task can very well require candidates to discuss what they have read through in that passage. The focus could be on plot, what happened in the text, right? Characterization or character development. Who said what to who? How does this character feel about that character? And then also use of language. The bulk of your answer for an A question should come from the given passage, because what you are going to be evaluated on is how much you can analyze from that given passage. I know I have had in my experience some pupils who are eager to share with me how much they remember or how much they know of events that have happened before, events that have happened after the passage. So I always have to tell them, but that's not what the task requires of you. For 15 marks, you have been given this passage. It comes from either one of the short stories or one of the novels. What are you supposed to do in an A question? Analyze the given passage. If you're going to provide some additional information, and that is perhaps background information to one of the major characters, then go ahead and do so. but that should only be minimal. You will not be able to do very well if the bulk of your answer is actually going to come from somewhere else and not come from the given passage. That's your A question. Moving on, a B question on the other hand, for 20 marks, so you know already the weightage is greater. A 20-mark question is going to require candidates to discuss their overall understanding of the entire novel or the entire short story. So this is where, if you want to prove how much you know, how well you know, this is where you do it. And as it says there, a given task could very likely focus on a main idea or theme that is found in the text. What have you read in this short story? It's about accepting death. What is this story about? It's about finding love. What is this story about? It's about slowly accepting aging and growing old. Those kind of major ideas that could be tested. So unlike the A question, the B question is going to focus on how well you know the text from beginning and end. And perhaps this is a good opportunity for me to remind candidates out there, although I have mentioned thorough, deep discussion here today, it does not mean that we are in a marathon to write everything that we remember. It is not a paper or an exam where I am testing you on how much you remember, testing your memory, and you're going to write for me pages and pages of what the story is like. You know the story, I know the story, you know I know the story. That's not what this paper is about. What you are going to do for that 20-mark question is, based on the given task, you quickly assess how much of what I know is what I'm going to put in. All right? Before I confuse Shafika, we are going to look at this checklist. And this is a checklist for an A question. What do we do when we get an A question? We know it's going to be based on a passage. So first thing to do, what are the keywords? Second thing to do, when we are reading through the passage, identify the plot, what's happened there, the character analysis, characterization in that passage, what are the aspects of language that we can see there. How much are we going to write? Am I going to discuss the entire passage? No. To answer the given task, decide on 3 or 4 points that I wish to discuss. And normally, I would suggest the 3 or 4 points translate into 3 or 4 paragraphs. Each of these content points, if I have 3 content points, I should have enough textual evidence to support them. If I have picked out a significant phrase, an important expression, that means I've already covered my AO1, my AO2, my AO3. All that's left is for me to remember to respond in a mature and critical manner. How do I feel about what's happened? Or how do I feel about who's done what to the character that's being described? And if you have fulfilled the 4 requirements or the 4 assessment objectives, you are clearly on the right track. The last part down there, as I've mentioned, do not insert irrelevant content that actually appears in other parts of the text. So if you are going to talk about the ending of the short story, it has nothing to do with the passage, then technically speaking, you are not responding to the question.
You don't get plus points for that.
There is not a competition to impress, as I mentioned, to impress
what you know.
All right, the examiner on how much I No. Likewise, with a B question, I have a similar checklist. Go through the requirements of the task. As I mentioned earlier, you're supposed to prove that you know the text well, but this is not a competition where you throw everything back into your essay. You are going to select 3 or 4 content points, support, and then respond in a mature and critical manner. And lastly, as I put there, do not just tell the story. Prove. Sorry, I had to cough.
That's okay, teacher.
All right.
It's all right.
Let's go to what kind of questions could appear. You've got there 1A and 1B, 2A and 2B. These come from the 6 short stories, and they are Embracing Your Shadow, Birds of Paradise, Thieving Daughter, Sambal Without Anchovies. So if you're going to answer based on the short stories, quickly decide. Am I going to do 1A and B, or am I going to do 2A and B? Decide, make the choice, read through the question, and prepare. Likewise, for novel, candidates going into the exam hall already know whether they are going to answer based on Clay Marble or The Lost King. So they're going to zoom in and quickly prepare for their response. Let's take a look at this. This is an extract taken from the short story Thieving Daughter. And those of you who are ready with your short stories, you know this extract very well. This comes from the beginning of the story, where you have Kak Noh, who's made a wonderful effort, she feels, of making breakfast in the morning. She fully expects her daughter Aisha to appreciate this tantalizing, delicious mihun breakfast. Unfortunately, as we read through this extract, it's rather clear that expectations are not met with reality. She's quite upset with the lack of enthusiasm. Her daughter doesn't seem to be interested in the breakfast she's prepared, and she ends by saying, "My daughter is a thief. She steals my beauty, and now she robs me of my appetite." This is the given extract, and it is followed by a 15-mark question. Analyze the relationship between Aisha and her mother. What are we going to do? We've read through the passage, we've read through the question. First thing to do is to break it down and decide what our content points are. And I would put content 1, she's clearly dissatisfied. I would put there content 2. Aisha, unfortunately, is oblivious to her mother's annoyance. She doesn't realize how her mother really feels. And content 3, I would put there, Kak Noh even begins to think to herself how her daughter is a criminal who has taken everything away from her. So once we've read through the question, we've understood the passage, we break down into 3 content points, and we prepare our essay. All right? That would be a suggested outline, as I put there, a suggested response outline to how you would answer this question. 2, 3 possible content ideas, but obviously thoroughly discussed and answering all 4 assessment objectives. If you have decided on the novel, all right, the novel, The Clay Marble, for example, and you get a question there, a real family grows. What are you going to do? From the beginning up till the end of the novel, the idea of family is one of the major themes found in the text. So looking at the statement, a real family, you know that this comes from a conversation that Jantu and Dara had. They talk about what it means to be a family and how what they have right now is not real. So you have Dara questioning Jantu. So what's a real family then? I've got there in different colors, as you can see, different definitions of family that are portrayed, conveyed in the text. Most Cambodians feel that they've lost family members. So for them, their families are now incomplete. For Dara, she might have a different picture. She realizes throughout her journey, looking for her family, meeting up with Chene, reuniting with Grandpa, she realizes that family is not bound, not restricted to blood, to DNA. Those who we feel are dear to our hearts, we will consider family. It doesn't mean that we are not in any way related, we are merely strangers, neighbors. And then I also put there somewhat of a negative twist. Some of us may feel a family is filled with love and warmth. Some of us have this concept of family in our hearts where we are loved and protected by our loved ones. But the idea of family as prescribed by the soldiers, where they say, Cambodia is your family, you must be loyal to the family, that's very different. So there you have it, how to answer an A and a B question for prose.
All right, that was a bit about section A for prose. And just to quote back what teacher said, we have to analyze the given passage and not to write irrelevant parts of the text that doesn't correspond to the question. Now we're going for a short break as usual, and we'll be right back here on Sukses SPM 2022 Pelajaran.
Didik TV KPM.
SPM candidates, you're still tuned in to us on Didik TV KPM for Sukses SPM 2022 Pelajaran. Now today we are revising for Kesusasteraan Inggeris, and for this segment we are going to be focusing on section B for drama. Now how do we start and kick off this class, teacher?
All right, let's go. What we looked at earlier was prose, and now we're moving to drama. Candidates out there would have already identified and prepared thoroughly whether they are going to answer questions based on Flowers for Algernon, The Merchant of Venice, or Hope Springs. Now let's take a look at several reminders of what an A question and a B question could be like. As we mentioned earlier, very similar to prose, an A question requires candidates to study the given passage. Based on what you can analyze and discuss in the passage, you are going to score 15 marks. If you're going to provide background information that could influence your response, meaning you'd like to insert this little bit, go ahead. You want to put in too much, then that would be a risk, because the bulk of your discussion should still come from the given passage. All right, we have already talked about that. Also, in a B question, we know that for 20 marks, candidates should know the drama in and out, meaning you thoroughly know the drama and you are prepared to answer a given task by assembling a response incorporating assessment objectives 1, 2, 3, and 4. Don't forget the ingredients for your recipe. All right, so let's take a quick look at what we have here. I've got questions for 5A and B coming from Flowers for Algernon, 6A and 6B coming from The Merchant of Venice, also 7A and B coming from Hope Springs. Candidates are going to immediately zoom in and select their drama of choice. But what I would like to point out is if you take a look at all the 3 A questions, you will find that they are rather similar in nature. For flowers, the question given is, how does Miss Kinnian feel about Charlie? So that involves plot and that involves character development. If you look at 6A, Merchant of Venice, how does the writer make this such a sad moment in the play? Again, you have plot, character, and use of language. If you look at 7A, Hope Springs, the question given could be something like, what do the 4 children think of the inspector at this point in the play? So similarity is rather clear, I think. The focus would be on the passage. The focus would be on what's happened within the perimeters of the passage. The focus would be you studying and analyzing the interaction between the characters and responding to the given task. Specifically the given task. For example, how does Miss Kinnian feel about Charlie here? So your focus would be on Miss Kinnian. For the Merchant of Venice, you're going to focus on how the scene or moment in the play has been made sad. What's happened? Who said what? Why is it described as a sad moment? And for Hope Springs, you would obviously mention the 4 characters, the 4 children there, and you would mention the inspector. So pretty clear with an A. Analyze the passage thoroughly. Likewise, if you look at the B questions given, all valued at 20 marks each, take a look at the B questions and see, you will find that each of the B questions have focused on a major idea found in the text. Look at Flowers for Algernon. Charlie's participation in the surgery was a mistake. Do you agree? So that means if you have read through the drama, you already have a response in mind. As you were reading through the play, some of you might have felt he shouldn't have done it. The surgery only brought him more pain and heartbreak. On the other hand, some of you out there may disagree. You might have a different opinion and you might say, no. Even though his joy was temporary, even though his triple intelligence was short-lived, he was happy for the short time that he was super smart. So that means that candidate is very sure, I agree or I disagree. That candidate should already be able to make a stand. And once he or she has made that stand, textual evidence must come in. You must support your points by quoting the appropriate, the suitable textual evidence. Let's take a look at what happens with Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. And the given statement is, we should all strive to show mercy to others. Do you agree? Was it right what happened in Act 4, Scene 1? Was it right for the court of law in Venice to have punished Shylock like that? Was it right for Shylock to embark on this plan of revenge based on the hatred that he so deeply felt for Antonio? So all that proves the candidate must know the plot, must understand character development, and must be able to come to a stand. Also, take a look at 7B, Hope Springs. Parents are our best role models. Those of you revising Hope Springs, I'm sure you would already have a certain stand. Do you feel that the parents did the right thing, sending their children to that island? Or do you think the children could have been helped in some other way? As you can see, all 3 B questions there, valued at 20 marks, require candidates to know the text, to respond to the task, and also to come to a clear stand. Those are the examples that I have given to you. Let's now take a look at what might happen with an A question. And what you have here is an extract coming from Flowers for Algernon. This comes towards the end of the play, where you already can see quite clearly our protagonist, Charlie Gordon, is regressing and regressing rather badly. All right, you have here Charlie Gordon unexpectedly appearing at his teacher's lesson or class. He shouldn't be there anymore because his intelligence has tripled, and she's quite taken aback by his sudden appearance, so much so that she asks him, "What are you doing here?" And she's quite flustered when he says, "I'd like for you to talk to me, not teach me. Can we have dinner together?" All right, she doesn't know how to respond to him, because to her, he is not the same student that she had anymore. What does Miss Kenyon feel? How does Miss Kenyon feel about Charlie at this moment in the play? And that is the question for 15 marks. How would a candidate answer after reading the dialogue? Well, let's take a look at the overview. I might say Miss Kenyon's hopes and wishes for Charlie to do well hasn't prepared her to see him in the flesh after so long. I might say that Miss Kenyon is surprised. I might say that Miss Kenyon is concerned about what has happened to Charlie recently. All right? I would also say Miss Kenyon is reluctant to go on the meal with him. So I would use this outline, expand on the 3 points, and finish my essay. All right? For a B question, let's take a look at what we were reading earlier about Shylock and the idea of mercy. Who shows mercy in this play? Who does not show mercy in this play? Why are we asked to show mercy to others? Mercy, forgiveness, kindness, tolerance, all good values that we should show upon our human brethren, meaning all other human beings are our brothers on earth. But you find after reading the play that it does not happen with Shylock, with Antonio's cruel treatment towards him. It does not happen to Antonio because of Shylock's grand plan for revenge. And also, finally, you have Portia's trick. And what she does in the court of law is to trap Shylock with the idea of mercy. When Shylock realizes too late he is actually on the losing end of the short stick, he is left with literally nothing. He doesn't get his money back, and furthermore, he is accused of plotting murder against Antonio. He is told that he must be fined, surrender his possessions, and even convert to a different faith. So I would put all that into my 20-mark answer.
Right. See that this section B encompass a lot of assessment objective A04 because it gives it wants candidates to give their personal opinions as well.
Correct.
All right. If you missed that, you can always go on our YouTube channel Didik TV KPM to watch this episode back. Now we're going for a short break now, and we'll be right back here on Sukses SPM 2022 Pecutan.
Didik TV KPM.
welcome back to Sukses SPM 2022 Pechdan with me, and today we are with teacher Asimah to teach us and revise with us on Kesusasteraan Inggeris. Now for this segment we are going to be focusing on section C for poetry, one of my favorite parts and one of my favorite English literature, if I can say. So for this segment, teacher Asimah, what is the first thing that we need to know?
All right, since you have very happy memories of poetry, let's take a look at what we have in store. Candidates would have revised all 10 of the poems very thoroughly, and they need to remember that when they open up the question paper, there are going to be 4 options. They would have perhaps finished their prose, they would have perhaps finished their drama, and they are now left with approximately 40 to 45 minutes to answer 2 questions based on 2 poems. I would like to remind everyone out there that because the poems are all provided, it also means that candidates are expected to fully utilize the lines of the poem as textual evidence. I know that sometimes you may feel paraphrasing is a good way to answer the question, but if your entire response is going to consist of approximately 5 to 6 paragraphs of content, and you have paraphrased throughout with no direct quote whatsoever, that may leave you at a disadvantage, because there are plenty of other candidates out there who would have utilized the lines of the poem and would have written those lines of the poem into their answers. So please quote where you can, when you can. It's not a competition about writing out the lines of the poem. Please do not misunderstand. When we say quote, it means use what is apt, what is suitable to support the points. I know some candidates would feel comforted by the fact that the poems are provided, so they are going to very quickly write everything back out as it is mentioned in the poem. But that's also, for me, a no-no. I know the poem, you know the poem, but which part of the poem was significant? Which line in the poem helps reinforce and support your idea? That's more important, yeah? So, an A question that might appear in the question paper is perhaps more likely going to focus more on the use of language and the technical aspects of poetry, meaning do try to identify devices that are found in the text. And a B question, also 15 marks, is probably going to ask candidates to discuss a main idea found in the poem. What am I talking about? I am talking about this. Possible A questions, possible B questions. So let's imagine that this is the morning of the exam and you have 4 options there. You have half term and tiger, 8A and 8B. You also have there 9A, 9B, 2 more poems, right? So now what do? You are supposed to make a choice. You are going to choose whether to answer half term and tiger or answer daffodils and if. Any of these poems sound familiar?
Quite. Daffodils, I think.
All right, okay. Let's start with daffodils, all right? The poem will be provided and you can read through to refresh your memory. Quickly focus on the question given. And what is the question given? All right? Explore how the language used in the poem shows nature's comforting qualities. We believe that nature is able to offer us comfort. What kind of comfort? As I have stated there, number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I have put there When our persona discovered the field of daffodils, they took away his loneliness. Number 2, when he sat down and watched the daffodils perform the dance for him, it was such a happy surprise. He felt he was being invited to sit down and watch a show. Number 3, the daffodils for him offer inspiration. And number 4, nature's beauty is always present in our lives. As I am reading through the poem, I would immediately identify where is the comfort. Where is the comfort from nature found? And I would, upon deciding on these 4 points, all right, I would identify the pieces of evidence that supports my 4 content points. So I could have a candidate answer this task by outlining the 4 points. I could have another candidate identify, for example, 3 poetic devices and say, nature's comforting qualities is clearly proven through the use of personification, through the use of hyperbole, through the use of visual imagery. Whether you take that route, or whether you use this method, both strategies work as long as the 4 assessment objectives are dealt with. Likewise with the 9B. Let's imagine that we are given the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. The 4 stanzas are given, you know the poem very well, you just refresh your memory and focus on the question. The question given is, our elders always want the best in life for us. What are we going to do? We are going to focus on 2 things. Who are our elders? And what do they mean when they say the best in life? As those points on the slide there show, it's clear that when Kipling wrote this poem, he did not mean the best in life to refer to material wealth. He did not mean the best in life to refer to glory, fame, and fortune. Rather, he wanted his young son, if you know your historical context, you know that he wrote this poem for his young son. He wanted his son to grow up as a man of honor, a man of great principles, a man who had good, strong values. So as I have placed there on the slide, the best in life actually refers to a life that has been lived out meaningfully. You have not chased for riches and fortune, you have not chased for fame and glory, but you have tried your best to be an honorable person, an honorable individual worthy of respect for others to look at as a person of good character. And that is how I would answer my A question for poetry and my B question for poetry.
All right, that was a really deep, thorough explanation on how to answer section C of poetry. Now, can we have a bit of a conclusion from you from what we revised from today's class?
All right, quick summary of what we've looked at. I think when candidates go into the exam hall, try not to be too nervous about terminology, try not to be flustered about textual evidence. I know I've mentioned that textual evidence is important, but in actual fact, what is hoped is that candidates can discuss in a mature manner the answers that they have put into their essays. If they're going to provide a touch and go answer, meaning I've already provided 15 different pieces of evidence, but there is no discussion whatsoever, I don't know if that candidate is going to do well. So take a deep breath. you know your text, answer the questions carefully, and manage your time well.
I do believe the candidates do have to understand and learn the assessment objectives because all the 6 essays encompass these objectives.
Correct.
Now, thank you so much, Teacher Asimah, for sharing tips and tricks for today's class. And for SPM candidates who are going to sit for this paper, I wish you all the best. And don't forget all the formats and formulas shared by Teacher Asimah for today. And thank you as well to our sign language interpreter, Teacher Saiful Amri. To all of you watching, until we meet again, I'm Syafiqah Farhim. Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. Bye.